Years ago, my husband had one request for me: come up with the best spinach artichoke dip ever. And so I did. I'm Mel from Mel's Kitchen Cafe, and I'm not trying to brag, but this really is the best spinach artichoke dip ever. If you've gotten used to ordering this at any restaurant, like I have, you are going to love this easy homemade version. Sometimes creating a white sauce like this, where you're adding flour to like a creamy ingredient like milk or heavy cream, if you cook that on the stovetop, it's really easy to burn. The trick is to use the microwave. So to my bowl, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of half and half. I'm going to urge you not to skimp and use milk. The half and half adds a really delicious creaminess that you're probably not going to get if you opt for milk. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of flour. That's what's gonna thicken the sauce. We're also going to add a pinch of black pepper, not too much, just a little bit to add flavor, and a pinch of coarse kosher salt. And you can add more salt towards the end if you don't feel like you have enough. I'm a firm believer in tasting as you go. We're gonna mix this up. You may not get every single lump of flour out. It's okay. Try not to be too upset about that. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'll find that as it cooks in the microwave, it's going to even out a lot, and it's gonna be really smooth and creamy. So to this mixture, I'm gonna add a little garlic powder. I've actually found that I like garlic powder more than I like fresh garlic in this recipe, which I know is a travesty to some people. So if you want to use fresh garlic, that's totally fine. We can still be friends. But for this particular recipe, garlic powder is where it's at. It kind of helps the sauce be a little bit smoother and creamier. That is my professional opinion. Okay, I'm gonna pop this in the microwave for about a minute. I cook it on 1-minute intervals, stirring in between, and probably in about 4 to 5 minutes, it's gonna be thick and creamy. So after it comes out of the microwave for that first minute, you may not notice much of a change. It's going to be fairly liquidy still and just slightly warm to the touch, but as you keep microwaving it for 1-minute intervals, it's gonna thicken up. I'm gonna go ahead and get started grating some of the Parmesan cheese. Now I have really strong feelings about cheese. I firmly believe that in recipes like this, where you want the cheesy, creamy flavor to come through, you need to grate the cheese yourself. I don't know if you know this, but pre-shredded cheese is coated with this powdery substance, which is great because it means the cheese doesn't clump together, but it makes it so the cheese doesn't melt quite as well. So I highly encourage you to grate your own mozzarella and Parmesan cheese for this. Plus you'll just kind of feel like a rock star and you'll get an arm workout. Neither of those are bad things. So I'm gonna grate about 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. I already have my mozzarella cheese grated. And the other thing that you can be prepping is your cream cheese. So we're gonna want about 8 ounces of cream cheese softened. So pulling that out ahead of time will make sure that the cream cheese is perfectly soft. That way when you add it to this warm white sauce, it's gonna melt and be really creamy instead of clumpy. So at the end of those 4 or 5 minutes in the microwave, the sauce is gonna be noticeably thicker, kind of like a pudding that's not quite set. So I'm just gonna whisk this up, get rid of any small lumps that might be in there, and then we're gonna start adding our other ingredients. The first thing I'm gonna add to this is the softened cream cheese that we already talked about. It's okay at this point if there's a few small lumps of the cream cheese. Once it all bakes together in your baking dish, when you spread it all out and put it in the oven, you're not gonna notice any of those small bumps and lumps. So I'm gonna let that sit for just a second in the warm mixture while I prep the rest of the artichokes. So this recipe calls for 2 cans of artichokes. Now when you go down the grocery store aisle, you might be a little overwhelmed at all the artichoke options out there. It's a little ridiculous. But I'm here to tell you, you really can't make a mistake with artichokes. You can use marinated artichokes, grilled artichokes. You can use artichokes just in water. It's really your choice. I like to use whole artichokes personally. I find the texture is a little better. They're not quite as mushy as the artichokes that are often sold already quartered. So go ahead and just chop up the artichokes into bite-sized pieces. It's not rocket science. However you decide to cut them up is just fine. But you'll want the equivalent of 2 cans of artichokes. So I'm gonna give this another good stir. At this point, the cream cheese is already softening really well into that warm white sauce mixture. Now here's the thing with this recipe. If you like a tiny little bit of flavor kick, now is the time to add a little hot sauce. You don't have to go crazy, just a couple drops to start out. It's the thing that takes this from just okay to really great. Promise me you're gonna add it. So let's mix that up. And at this point, I like to taste just a little to see if I need any extra salt and pepper. It's really important with this dip because a bland spinach artichoke dip is no dip at all. Let's see. That's good, but I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of extra salt. So now you can go ahead and add all of the other ingredients. I like to add the cheeses first, so I'm gonna add that Parmesan cheese that I grated, and then the mozzarella cheese. I find that mozzarella cheese melts the best. You could probably use Monterey Jack or another kind of creamy white cheese, but mozzarella is my favorite. I like to save the spinach for last, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the artichokes. So I use chopped frozen spinach for this recipe. I thaw it and then I squeeze out all the water. You can do this with a clean kitchen towel, a potato ricer, a nut milk bag, any way to get the water out. But you definitely want it dry enough that you can piece it through your fingers and there's no liquid there. It's not dripping with water. And the reason I like to add it at the end is because I like to kind of separate it a little bit with my fingers so that the clumps of spinach, which is really natural after you've pressed all the water out, that they kind of separate. And that means that the spinach really incorporates throughout the whole dip instead of having lots of clumps of spinach. So I'm just gonna fold that all together. Seriously, whenever I'm making this, I'm like, I don't even wanna wait for it to bake. I could literally dig in with a spoon right now. So I'm gonna mix this around until all of that spinach is really evenly combined throughout the dip, and then we're gonna put it into a baking dish. I like to use about a 9x13 baking dish for this recipe. I'm gonna grease my baking dish with nonstick cooking spray. And once you kind of get it all out of this bowl, and I'm telling you, you need to get every little bit, we're just gonna spread it into an even layer and pop it in the oven. Now this dip needs about 30 minutes at about 350 degrees. You'll notice it's done when the edges are really golden and bubbly and it's really hot throughout. Plus, you're gonna smell it before it's done baking and you're gonna wanna dig right in. We love to serve it really warm, but you can also eat it cold if you want. It's great with baguette slices, tortilla chips, crackers. The options are endless. And I won't judge you if you dig in with a spoon either. I hope you love this best ever spinach artichoke dip recipe. It's such a family favorite of ours, and I hope it quickly becomes a favorite of yours too. For this recipe and many of our other favorite appetizer recipes, visit melskitchencafe.com.